I thought it seemed appropriate today to film the message from a place that really feels like home to me. And the reason it feels like home is because this is our home. Welcome to the Nelsons' home. But today I wanted to film from not just any part in our house. I wanted to film from the basement. The basement is a place that's pretty significant to our family, pretty significant to me, in fact. This basement, this is the place where we've watched most of our online services during this last quarantine season. This is the place that we often hang out, family movie night, popcorn and smoothies on a Friday or maybe even a Saturday. This is the place that I usually fall asleep as I try to get through any movie with my wife. And this is the place where my daughter scratched her name into the TV one day as she was trying to carve her name into our TV screen. And this is the place where we watch most of our Netflix. You know, I think Netflix has changed entertainment forever. And more than that, I think Netflix has changed our culture forever as well. In fact, our culture has invented this brand new word because of the behavior that Netflix has inspired. It's the word binge watching. No longer do we have to wait a whole week to watch our favorite show for 30 minutes. Now we can watch a whole season. We can watch a whole series in less than a week. And some of you have done that. I definitely have done that. Could you imagine having to wait a week to watch the next episode of a show? I mean, could you imagine that type of cruelty? But here's the thing. Let's talk history for just a little bit. Netflix first began by sending DVDs into people's mailboxes, which sounds like an ancient and barbaric practice at this point in time. But this happened way back in 1998 when they were competing with Blockbuster Video. Do you remember Blockbuster? Rest in peace, Blockbuster. Blockbuster is the first place I worked, actually, in high school. Netflix was competing with Blockbuster, and now, over 20 years later, there are over 170 million Netflix users, and Blockbuster is all but extinct, except one store in Bend, Oregon. Now, the word binge is an interesting word. The word binge means hyper engagement in an activity for a short period of time. That's what it means to binge. And there's been seasons where I've watched Netflix for 3 weeks straight. Not straight, but you know what I mean. I mean, every day for 3 weeks, and then I don't watch it again for maybe 3 months. That's a good example of a binge. And I think this is so interesting. The good part about this is that you can go at your own pace when it comes to a show. You can go at your own pace. The bad part is that pace might not be healthy. It might not be sustainable. Now, I think there is a connection between the on-demand binge nature of our culture and Christianity. So I want to introduce you to a word that I made up. This is a word that describes what I see when people often show up at church. If we take binge culture and we add to it Christianity, the sum total of those two parts is this word, Binge-ianity. And Binge-ianity is hyper engagement with Christianity for a short period of time. And that's a weird word. I know Binge-ianity, it's a weird word. Feel free to say it from home, wherever you are, just so that you get comfortable with it. Binge-ianity. And as a pastor, I see this all the time. I see people walk through the doors of churches, and in our church, SMCC, and they are so excited to be there. I mean, if the doors are open for whatever event it might be, they're there. They don't miss a Sunday. They're sharing it on Facebook. They are inviting their friends. They join groups. People join teams. They maybe even start to give. I mean, they are all in. And this lasts for 2 months. And maybe this lasts for 6 months. And then out of nowhere, it all comes to a screeching halt. It's like the season is over. The binge comes to an end. No church, no serving, no groups, no next steps, no nothing. And I just think to myself, what happened? I mean, honestly, this is the type of thing that just keeps me up at night? What was it? What happened? What did we say? What did we do? What caused somebody to go from this hyper engagement with Christianity or Jesus or Christian activity, and then all of a sudden, what led them to just put a halt on all of that? It keeps me up at night. And by the way, if you're all in with Jesus right now, if you're all in on this Jesus journey, you're excited, you're pumped, you're fired up. Is it possible that the season that you're in right now could come to an end? Is it possible that maybe you didn't know this, but that really you're just in the middle of a binge? Today I want to talk about how to avoid this. Today I want to talk about how to avoid binge-ianity. Because although this shocks me as a pastor, this type of behavior, it did not shock Jesus. One day, the crowds around Jesus, they were huge. People were flocking to see him. They couldn't get enough of him. To use the word of today's message, they were binging on Jesus. They wanted more food from him. They wanted more healing from him. They wanted to see more miracles. They wanted more teaching. They could not get enough of Jesus. But not because they wanted to follow him, simply because they wanted to consume everything that he had to give. It truly was binge-ianity. And so at one point in the story, Jesus goes out onto a lake. It would serve as a first century amphitheater. And so hundreds of people, if not thousands, could see him and listen and hear everything he had to say. And so Jesus wanted to draw these people in. He wanted to adjust and shift their expectations. And so he describes 4 types of people. And then he invites everybody to reconsider their approach to him. Here's what happened. This is in Matthew chapter 13, starting in verse 1. Matthew was an eyewitness to this moment. And this is what it says. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables. Jesus taught in the existing style of the rabbis. He taught with hyperbole. He taught in parable. Parable comes from 2 Greek words put together, the word para and the word balo. Balo means to throw, and para means alongside. So a parable is a truth thrown alongside everyday life. And so Jesus taught in parables, and parables typically have one main point. In fact, it's a little bit dangerous to think every detail of every parable represents something else, because when we do that, we move out of the realm of parable and into the realm of allegory. Jesus taught in parables masterfully. And what he says next is one of his most famous. It's the parable of the soils. And this is how it goes. Jesus says, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, or other translations say among the weeds, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Then he says, whoever has ears, let him hear. So just so that we're all on the same page, Jesus is talking about what happens when seed falls on certain types of soil. And so in this parable, the first type of soil really is it's the path. This is soil that is so hard that the seed cannot find its way into the dirt. And of course, with this type of soil, this path, in fact, the birds just come, they snatch the seed before the seed has any opportunity to ever grow. The second type of soil that Jesus is talking about is the rocky soil, which allows for just a little bit more growth, but it's the type of soil that doesn't allow for very much depth. And once the heat picks up in the Middle East, the Middle Eastern sun comes, it just dries it up. That seed cannot flourish, it cannot thrive, it cannot bear any fruit. The third type of soil that Jesus describes is soil that's that's full of weeds. There's thorns, and it allows for even more growth than the other two types of soils. But as that plant grows, the growth, the life it's really choked out by everything that surrounds it. So it allows for more depth, but it doesn't allow for very much growth. And then there's the fourth type of soil that Jesus describes. This is fertile soil, and this type of soil, it provides the type of environment and nourishment that a seed needs to really grow, to really thrive. And so Jesus tells this story, and of course the people in the crowd, they're confused. I mean, I imagine them looking around thinking, did you get that? Did you understand that? I mean, like somebody who talks too much during a Netflix series and they're lost, the people on the shore, they're lost as well, including the disciples. And so the disciples, they follow up with Jesus and they say, Jesus, we need some more clarity. We don't know where you're going with all of this. And so Matthew continues to record for us what happens. It goes like this. The disciples came to him and asked, Jesus, why do you speak to the people in parables? Like, why do you talk this way? We're kind of lost, man. He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Now, Jesus isn't talking about having more money. He's not talking about having more blessing. What he's talking about is having more insight, having more wisdom. See, parables have this effect. Parables can conceal and they can reveal. Parables can conceal truth from people who do not care for it. And parables can reveal truth to those who are desperate, eager, and hungry for it. So Jesus isn't trying to keep people in the dark, but Jesus knows that some people, well, they can just keep themselves in the dark. And so then Jesus goes back to the parable. He goes back to that story, and he breaks it down for them, and he breaks it down for us. This is what the parable means. He says, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But listen to this part. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. Hyper engagement in an activity that lasts only a short time. These are people who receive the truth with joy. They hear the message of Jesus and they shoot up. They are so excited. But it's a binge. It only lasts for a short period of time. And here's why. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. It all comes to a screeching halt, leaving everybody else who maybe knew them wondering, man, what happened? The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. So when Jesus got done explaining this parable, I imagine there were some people that were looking at the ground. They were staring at the sand on the seashore. They were looking up into the bright blue Middle Eastern sky because Jesus had just described them. And perhaps Jesus has just described you because he's just described me. And at this point, Jesus wants just one question running through everybody's mind. Everybody who hears this parable, who hears this teaching from Jesus, it's designed to leave them with just one question. And the question is this question: which soil am I? So that seed in the parable, that represented God's truth. And the four soils, it's really representing four very common approaches to who Jesus is. And so the question that remains is, which soil am I? And some of you, you know right now which soil you are. And for others of us, we've been different soils throughout different seasons of our lives. But this question, it's a question that gets us thinking, which soil am I? Now let me kind of unpack these soils just a little bit more to maybe help you identify which approach you currently have towards Jesus. The first soil, that path that's so hard, it just doesn't allow for any growth. That path really represents the resistant person. This person, they have some doubt, and it's not the type of doubt that's leading them to look for answers. I mean, this is the type of doubt, this is the type of resistance that doesn't want any answers. This is the type of person who is not open to any new information at all, especially information that would upset their worldview or perhaps challenge them. And maybe it was religion that led to this resistance. Maybe it was irreligion that led to this resistance, but this person, the person who identifies with this soil, is a resistant person. But the seed that falls on the rocky soil, it really represents the impulsive person. The impulsive person. This is a person who maybe said yes to Jesus very, very quickly. This is the person who maybe received the message of Jesus with joy. But this is a person who, for whatever reason, didn't have roots that went deep into the message of Jesus. This is a person who is in the middle of binge-ianity. This is a person who really is on the brink of drying up. It might just be a matter of days, a matter of weeks, a matter of months, or just one moment or circumstance. And it's all going to dry up. And perhaps this is due to the reason they said yes to Jesus in the first place. Maybe this person said yes to Jesus because they were promised, maybe from a pastor, maybe from a church, or they just assumed that Jesus would make everything easier, that their circumstances would automatically get better, that if they said yes to Jesus, he would do a few things for them and life would finally be fixed. And that didn't happen, or it's about to not happen. And so for this person, the roots just have not gone deep enough to bring them through seasons of difficulty or a dry spell. So this is the person who really does identify with the rocky soil. But the seed that fell into the weeds, or the soil that's really being impacted by thorns, this is a person who's simply torn. This is a person who thinks Jesus is very, very important. And maybe they've thought that for a long, long time. But the problem here is that there's other things that are important as well. As equally as important as Jesus, or perhaps more important than Jesus. So for this person, Jesus is maybe a God, but just one of many gods in their life. And so for this person, the reason they said yes to Jesus has maybe been forgotten. And Jesus, in his message, trusting him, it's being choked out by other things, maybe good things even, but other things that are now more important than Jesus. And then, of course, there's the good soil. And the seed that fell on good soil, it really represents the growing person. The growing person. This is a person who has heard God's truth. They've received it. They've acted on it. They've trusted it. And now they're bearing incredible fruit in their lives. See, following Jesus, it is not a fleeting binge. It is a daily walk. And walk is a great word for a series of next steps. And we grow in our faith. We grow in our trust when we see Jesus for who he is. It's not when we try harder. It's when we see better. And when you see Jesus for who he really is, it has an impact on who you are. When you see what he's done on the cross, and when you see what he did with the empty tomb, it leads to appreciation. It leads to awe, and we naturally grow. When you see his commands as good, obedience, it moves from being a have to a want to. And when that happens, you're growing. And when you see spiritual disciplines as a way to help you see him better, you naturally grow. And when you invest your life in the lives of other people, you see God's will for your life. And when you see that, you naturally grow. So to be good soil, we need to put ourselves into places and situations and environments where we can simply see Jesus better, because when we see him for who he really is, we naturally grow. It's like being good soil. But here's the problem with Binge-ianity. Binge-ianity mistakes seeing Jesus for who he really is and enjoying him with simply enjoying environments where Jesus is talked about. When we confuse Christ with Christian environments, we are in danger of consuming Christian environments and not shifting our trust to who Christ is. And when we do that, we're in danger of binge-ianity. So following Jesus it's a series of next steps, often called a walk. It's not a fleeting binge. And we grow not by trying harder. We grow when we see him better. So I figured as we come to the end of this time together here in my home that I would talk about four types of people that are probably watching this today. 4 types of people that maybe do correspond with these 4 types of soils. Maybe you're watching this and you're just scrolling through. You've just been scrolling social media. You're maybe in the middle of a binge and somehow you scroll to this and you've stayed tuned to this point. If that's you, I just want to invite you to consider investigating Jesus, seeing him for who he really is. And if you're wondering, what does that look like? What does that mean? I have a lot of questions. Of course, you could reach out to us through all of our channels or email us. But maybe you just need to tune in next week. Not to binge Christianity next week, but to investigate Jesus next week. To see him for who he really is. But there's another group of people, and this message has really resonated with you because you're pretty fired up about Jesus, but you're wondering if you're like that rocky soil that allows for something to spring up quickly, but it won't last through the difficulties of life, the heat, to use Jesus' words, the heat of life. And if that's you, I want to invite you to do the same thing, to see Jesus for who he really is, and to take your next step. Not to take every next step possible at the same time, because I think that can lead to burnout, but to just take one next step, whatever that next step might be. And if you're wondering, Eric, what are a few next steps? Well, if you've trusted Jesus, one of the most powerful next steps you can take is the next step of baptism, because it is a chance for you to declare who you are and who you trust. And that is the type of thing that takes roots and just causes them to grow just a little bit deeper. So if you're wondering if you're in the middle of a binge or you think that this season could come to an end at some point, my encouragement to you, really it's a caution, is to make sure you take your next step before this season of your life, this episode of your life comes to an end. But perhaps you're watching this and you get the sense that you already went through that season. And now this whole Jesus thing is sort of fading away for you. My invitation to you is also the same. It's to see Jesus for who he really is. But perhaps you need to go back to why you said yes to Jesus in the first place. Because maybe you said yes to Jesus for a reason that's not actually the reason that anybody should say yes to Jesus. But if you sense that this season of your life is fading away, Jesus is not as important to you as he used to be or as important to you as other things are to you, I want to invite you to challenge yourself. To challenge yourself to say yes to a spiritual discipline. Spiritual disciplines are things like reading or praying, fasting, or giving. They're hard things. They're challenging things. But when you say yes to a spiritual discipline, you put yourself into an environment where you can see Jesus more clearly. It's like tilling up the soil. Sometimes it's like getting rid of the weeds, getting rid of the thorns so that you can see him for who he really is. And let me just challenge you with one very hard spiritual discipline, the discipline of giving. See, in this parable, Jesus said that it's wealth, it's financial resources that often choke out the message of Jesus in people's lives. And so when you challenge yourself to the spiritual discipline of giving, you're taking a thorn for a lot of people. And you're saying, you know what? I'm actually going to leverage this for generosity. I'm going to leverage this so that I can see Jesus more clearly in my own life, and I can see him at work in the life of other people because of generosity. So here's what you could do. Challenge yourself for the next 3 months to pick a number and give it away. It doesn't have to be here. It can be anywhere. And see if that's the type of thing that takes the thorn out of some soil in your life and allows for more growth, allows for more fruit. Now, there's one last group of people watching this, and you've done the hard work to investigate Jesus. You've looked carefully at what it means to obey him, and you've shifted your allegiance. And now, to use the words of the parable, your life looks like good soil. You're bearing fruit. You're experiencing growth. You are growing. And you know, like so many people know, growth comes at different speeds in life, through different seasons. Sometimes we grow rapidly. And sometimes growth is a little bit more difficult to see. It's hard to see. But you know what it means to be good soil. You know what it means to take your next step. You know what it means to walk with Christ. And I want to say thank you to you. Because of you, other people can begin to walk with Christ because of your generosity. And they can go at their own pace because of the type of church you've allowed us to create here at SMCC. And so to you, I want to say thank you. I want to encourage you to keep walking. And I do want to encourage you to walk with others who need to walk with you. So the bottom line of today's message is very simple. Do not binge Christianity, but rather grow in Christ. Regardless of what type of person you are, regardless of what type of soil you are, it's my hope that you would see Christianity not as a fleeting binge, not as a fleeting season of hyperactivity with Christianity, but you would see all of this as a journey. You would see all of this as a series of next steps, not a binge, but a daily walk. So let's not binge Christianity, but let's grow in Christ.